Welcome back to Inside Politics. Our guest today, Karl Dean, a candidate for governor in the Democratic primary on August 2nd, former mayor of Nashville. Mayor, we have learned that within the next few hours, the Black Caucus in the state legislature is going to endorse your opponent in the Democratic primary, Craig Fitzhugh. He's also gotten endorsements from the State Employees Association and from state teachers. Those are pretty core Democratic groups. If you're the nominee, how do you reunite the party behind you as the candidate?
Well, I don't think that will be difficult. Obviously, I think my opponent has spent many years in the legislature, and obviously has ties that that he has from spending that much time in the legislature. Bob Clement endorsed me this week. I'm spending today with Lincoln Davis, former congressman, who has endorsed me. We've had endorsements from a variety of unions, and I feel good about where we are in the campaign. I feel very good about where we are compared to my opponent in terms of all the polls I've seen. So, are you already focusing on what you're going to do in the fall? Are you already more or less thinking that the primary is going to be something you're going to win, not much question? No, I mean, I think you can't take anything for granted, and I never would in a race. So, the first things first is to win the primary, and I think things are going very well for us, and then we'll move into the next phase. You mentioned the endorsement of Bob Clement, who you defeated for mayor back in 2008. What's it like getting a former opponent to endorse you? People who've endorsed you usually are people that liked you in the past, and y'all had a reasonably contentious race back in 2008. Yeah, but I think we always got along. I mean, it's certainly since I've been mayor and during this race, Bob has been supportive and helpful. And I think it says a lot about him that he's willing to step out and help me in the campaign. And I certainly have a great deal of respect for him and value his endorsement, which he did just this week. It's been interesting to watching this campaign. The Republicans, when you go to their websites, it's hard to find the word Republican on their website. They talk about, even on their TV spots, they talk about being conservatives, not about being Republican. I've been to your website, and it's kind of hard to find the word Democrat on there, too. Is that because it's been hard for Democrats to win statewide races here? No, I mean, I'm certainly known as a Democrat. I've been in public life for a long time and always have been a Democrat. I served, of course, in a nonpartisan position as mayor and did it in a nonpartisan way. But I'm running in a Democratic primary and proud to be a Democrat. Going back to an issue that may be emerging probably more after the new governor is elected, but the U.S. Supreme Court recently struck down federal laws that prohibited states from allowing sports gambling to occur. States always looking for revenue, usually most every year. Is that something that Tennessee ought to look at? Is it going to take a constitutional amendment? Should we allow gambling in Tennessee on sports contests? Well, I think it's something that we ought to examine, but I think we ought to do it very cautiously and make sure there's a lot of public input on it. I haven't have a position on that yet, but because the Supreme Court ruling is so new. But I think we can live with our current revenue streams, and we'll just have to see how other states react and what happens going forward. Everybody looks at this and immediately thinks about the lottery. If you went in this direction, would you be more inclined to look at one where the state runs the sports gambling the way they run the lottery and nobody else can compete with them, or would this be more of a private enterprise kind of thing and the state would get its cut? I think that's one of the things you got to look at carefully. I mean, I don't want to, this has been about a week, and I don't want to start devising a policy on something that we need to examine. There's a recent Vanderbilt poll out that showed one of your potential opponents in November, Congressman Diane Black, is leading in name recognitions, but had what one of the pollsters said was baked-in negative numbers from some voters who don't like her. Is she the candidate you'd most like to run against on the GOP side? I'm going to leave that to the Republicans to decide, but I think the most interesting thing in the Vanderbilt poll to me was that when they polled independents of all the candidates for governor, Democrat and Republican, I had the highest favorabilities amongst independents at 60%. And I think that is exactly where I want to be. A question that you may want to look at election night, if not before, is that in the last several years, this is completely reversed. It used to be the Democratic primary
their candidates would attract many, many more voters to vote in that primary in August than what the Republicans did. I suspect it'll be just the opposite this time. You'll be several 100,000 votes less than whatever the Republican nominee is. How do you bring those voters back over to at least look at you when you go to November, when you'll be voting against each other?
Well, I mean, I think I go into this certainly understanding that in terms of party identification, Republicans in the polls have an advantage, and that will probably be reflected on primary day. But what I do think is happening is that we're in a position to appeal to Democrats and, as I've mentioned, to independents and I think to moderate Republicans. I mean, there are going to be a substantial number of people who will be looking for leadership that can work together with both parties, leadership that can move the state forward, and leadership that's not focused on issues that don't affect Tennessee or issues we can't control, but on things that we can control: education, health care, jobs, and somebody who can help move us forward there and get things done. I mean, basically, I want to work hard and just get things done. That's
one of the most popular politicians in the state, if you look at the polls, appears to be President Donald Trump. He was here earlier this week campaigning largely for Marsha Blackburn in the U.S. Senate. A mention or two about the governor's race, with Diane Black in particular. Do you expect the president to be coming to, if you're the nominee, do you expect the president to be coming back to the state and working for Diane Black or whoever the Republican nominee is?
Well, I think he has said that he'll be in Tennessee many, many times, so I would assume he will be back. And I'm not going to concentrate on the national political scene. I'm going to focus on Tennessee and what needs to be done in Tennessee to make this state an even better place to live.
There is one group nationally that's looking at this, and that's the Republican Governors Association. Governor Haslam is heading that up again this year, and he's put $2.2 million aside to be used for the Republican nominee to campaign against you, whoever the Democrat is. That's quite a bit of money.
It is a lot of money, but I think there will be similar interest from others in seeing that our state has a strong campaign from the Democrat. And you know, I looked at this race very carefully before I got in. This just wasn't something I just wanted to do as the next thing to do. This was something I wanted, number one, to see if I can make a contribution, number two, whether this is possible. And so, having done this now for many months, I certainly believe it is possible. I believed it when I got in, but I think it's even more likely. You know, there is a desire for a change in the tone of politics. There is a desire for people who can actually do things in government and make government work in a positive way for the state, and I think I can do that.
Karl Dean is our guest. He's the former mayor of Nashville, now a Democratic candidate for governor in the August 2nd primary. Back to continue our conversation after you watch these messages.